Okay, multiplying and dividing fractions or decimals, I'm sorry, is also not very difficult. Let's look at 3 2/10, and let's multiply. I don't want to work too hard today, so let's multiply it by 55 hundredths. So I'm going to multiply times 55 hundredths. Okay. For right now, I'm going to ignore the decimal places. I'm going to multiply just like I would normally. 5 times 2 is 10. Put down my 0, carry a 1. 5 times 3 is 15, plus the 1, 16. Since I'm moving over a place, I'm going to add a 0. I picked the same number twice so that after I figured out once, I could do it again. It's just going to be 160 again, isn't it? 5 times 2 is still 0. I'm still carrying a 1. 5 times 3 is still 15, plus 1 is still 16. Now I'll just add these. 0, 6, 7, 1. Where do I put my decimal place? That's the tricky part. It's actually not very tricky if you look at this. Look at your original problem. How many numerals or how many numbers are to the right of the decimal place? Well, here there's 1, 2, 3 numbers to the right of the decimal place. In my answer, I have to have 3 numbers to the right of the decimal place. 1, 2, 3. Works out the same way. And again, some of them will be easier, some will be more complex. This one was kind of average, middle of the road. All right, let's move on to division. Division is a little bit trickier. Let me take a look at a problem like sure, 101 and 62 hundredths, and we're going to divide this by 3/10. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it so that I can use it. 1 and 62 hundredths divided by 3/10. Normally, if you have to do these kinds of problems, you're going to have a calculator handy. It's not a big deal, but it's also good to know how to do these. I know some of you still need to take some HSGQEs or some SBAs, and you're not allowed calculators on those. So it's good to know how to do these. The important thing to know is that you cannot divide by a decimal. If this is a decimal, we have to move it. So we're going to move it over one space so that it's no longer a decimal. I'm going to move this over to here. It's no longer a decimal. 3 doesn't even need a decimal point, so I don't even really need that. But since I moved it over one space here, I need to move it over one space here also. So I can move it over to here. Now instead of 1 and 62 hundredths, I have 16 and 2/10. Get rid of this. At this point, I'm ready to divide, except that I want to make sure that I don't make a mistake. I'm going to move this decimal point straight up. Now you know how to divide. 3 doesn't go into 1, so I could put a 0 or just leave it. Does 3 go into 16? Yes, 5 times. That makes 3 times 5 is 15. Subtract it off, I have a remainder of 1. I'll bring down my 2. If you really, really want to, you can bring down your decimal, but you don't need to. It's already there in your answer. So 3 goes into 12 4 times. 3 times 4 is 12. There's no remainder. I am done. And that is how you would do that, how you divide with decimals. Remember, the critical part to remember here is you cannot divide with the decimal. So however many places I have to move it over, this time it was only 1, maybe it'd be 2 or 3 or even more. However many places I move here, I also have to move here. I want to look at one more example. Let's look at, I have this one here is interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, how many places am I going to have to move to eliminate the decimal here in the divisor? I'm going to have to move it over 2 places. So I'm going to go ahead and move it over my 2 places. This is now 6, which means I don't need my decimal point. I don't need my 0. I'm going to go ahead and erase those just to clear things up for us. Here's where it becomes interesting. I moved this over 2 spaces. I need to move this over 2 spaces. Uh-oh. That's okay. Here's what I'm going to do. 1, I'm going to add a 0. 2. Extend my line. Now I have I will get the correct answer. How many times does 6 go into 31? 5 times. Subtract off my 30. I end up with 1, bring down my 2. 6 goes into 12 2 times, which is 12. End up with 0. Bring down my next number, which is also 0. 6 goes into 0 0 times. I am done. So the answer to 31 2/10 divided by 6/100 is equal to 520. Double check it on your calculator if you wish. One other thing to remember, in both of my examples, I made my divisor less than my dividend. That's not necessary. Okay, in fact, let me show you just so that you understand what I'm talking about. It's very, very possible if I have, for instance, let me change and say, what if I had 3/100 and I was going to divide by 1 5/10? 1 5/10 is larger than 3/100, and that's okay. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to have my 3/100 and I'm going to divide by 1 5/10. That's the beautiful thing about working with decimals is you can do this. Again, I have to move it over how many spaces? 1 space. There's my decimal now. Since I moved it over here 1 space, I have to move it over here 1 space. My decimal is now over here. And now I have got 3/10 divided by 15. I can put my decimal straight up, and I can tell already that I'm going to need to add a 0. How many times does 15 go into 0? 0 times. How many times does 15 go into 3? 0 times. How many times does 15 go into 30? 2 times. So what is my final answer? And I don't really need this 0 here. You'll see it many times. I prefer to write it without it. So if I have 3/100 divided by 1 1/2 or 1 5/10, the answer is 200. Okay. And the video is getting very long, so I'll just go ahead and stop now.